Councillors, the time is now 6:30 p.m. and I will declare the meeting open. I advise the public that this meeting is being webcast and members of the gallery may have their voice and image captured. By attending, you consent to being captured, recorded and webcast. Any statements made by individual persons in the course of this meeting and the statements of those individuals are not of council. You should refrain from making any defamatory remarks or making comments about another individual without their consent. Council accepts no liability for any statements made by individuals during the course of the meeting. In the event of an emergency or the fire alarm sounding, please remain calm and wait for instructions from the General Manager and Council officers. If we need to evacuate the building, Council's emergency muster point during the Council meeting is the lower car park. In the event of a medical emergency, please alert Council staff for assistance. Council acknowledges the Wanneroo peoples as the traditional custodians of this land we're meeting on today. We pay respect to elders past, present and future, and I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. We also acknowledge the Awabakal people to the east and the Darkinjung people to the south, and other Aboriginal peoples who now live within the Cessnock local government area. Now we'll move on to the prayer. Councillor Mason, we'll stand for the prayer, please.
Most gracious God, we pray for the Council of the City of Cessnock, its members and officers. Direct our work and influence our decisions to the advancement of your glory and the safety and welfare of this city, so that peace and happiness, truth and justice and sound development may be established among us. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Now we have no apologies or leave of absence to vote through tonight. We do have Councillor Madden looking to join us via AV link. If I could get someone to move that. Councillor Hill, seconded Councillor Harrington, put that forward for a vote. All in favour? It's unanimous. Councillor Madden, can you hear us okay? Okay. Any disclosures of interest? No disclosure of interest. There's no Merrill minutes. The confirmation of minutes. Could I have someone to move that? Councillor Lee, seconded Councillor Pascoe. All in favour? It's unanimous. Now, I didn't see any motions of urgency. Is there any motions of urgency Councillor wishes to put forward? Okay, so before we move on, we did have our running agenda, but I do appreciate that there's members of the community that has come in specifically to hear of one particular item on the agenda tonight. So I'd look to suspend standing business to move report CC3/2026. That's the application to the Independent Pricing and Regulatory Tribunal for a permanent one-year special variation of 39.9% be brought forward to be dealt with as the first item of the agenda. This will need a resolution of council, so could I please have someone to move if you are so in favour? Councillor Hawkins, seconded Councillor Mason. All in favour? Councillors Dixon, Dunn, Harrington, Hill, Lee, Madden, Mason, Palmowski, Pascoe and Hawkins. Those against? Councillor Jerd and King. So we're now resolved to move on, and instead of dealing with the rescission motion, we'll deal with report CC3/2026, and this is the application to the Independent Pricing and Regulatory Tribunal for a permanent one-year special variation of 39.9%. Could I have someone to move that? Councillor Mason, seconded Councillor Hill. All in favour? Sorry, speaking. So.
Sorry, don't go.
Well, I'll open it up for debate. Anyone speaking?
Councillor Mason, rather than reserve that?
Yes. So, as the mover of the motion, Councillor Mason, would you like to speak first? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The cost of living pressures facing our ratepayers are unprecedented in the lifetimes of most, if not all, in our community. There is nobody in the room who wants to raise rates by almost 40%. And there's never really been a good time to raise rates. If we look back at the last 10 to 15 years, there have been better times than now for a rate rise of this scale, but at the time, none of those would have been considered by the community as a good time to do so. Unfortunately, I don't believe the financial pressures facing our residents are likely to meaningfully abate anytime soon. As much as I'd like to, I think it's futile to entertain the possibility that things will improve and there will be a better time in the future for a rate rise. This may be the case, but we can't bank on it. Shrinking council's workforce or limiting its activities would have material long-term negative consequences on our residents, and I don't support this idea. Maintaining our road network is one of our largest costs, and falling behind on road maintenance is not an option. When roads deteriorate beyond a certain level, the result is complete renewal, which costs around 10 times as much as routine maintenance. With the rapid growth of the LGA and the additional impost on road usage, which is accelerating deterioration, we must continue to invest in the adequate maintenance of our entire road network, and not doing so will simply burden us in future years or put this noose around the next generation, which I just can't support.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Jode.
Thank you, Mayor. I've just got a few questions to start with. So our previous council and Mayor said we had a surplus for 3 years leading up to September 2024 election. Did we actually have a surplus?
Put that through to CFO.
Oh, I can't speak for the past mayor's comments. I can refer councillors to the financial statements that were published. At the time, we have had a surplus, but in no time in my council, apart from 1 year, have we had an operating surplus after grants and income are taken out.
Okay. So in October 24, when it was publicly stated that we were in the best financial position in the Valley, was that true? That was a press release.
I can't speak to the press release, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. So I don't... All right. Everyday operations and the budget of this, do councillors have access to this?
So the question is the operating
Yeah. So
budget.
everyday operations and budgets, do councillors have access to this?
CFO.
Sorry, just to clarify, the everyday operational budget? Was that the question?
Every day you would see budgets, things like that. Do councillors have access to it?
Councillors are provided with the budget figure at a high level, recognising that you have a strategic role for council. The actual individual lines of the budget extend somewhere over 10,000 lines, making up very different funding activities, some that are legislatively required and some that are a little bit more discretionary. Councillors wouldn't have the time, or it's probably not worth the time, a council to go through each of those individual lines. So we provide you with a strategic level of budgeting.
Do councillors have any say on everyday runnings of council?
Well, that's really a question for the GM, but the basic breakdown is the day-to-day operations do fall under the general manager, more leading council and the policy side of things. Yeah,
I just want to make it clear some of the things. The memo I got today about when I asked what phones we have, what we pay for with staff, how come I can't have access to how many phones and iPads? Why is that classed as operational?
I'll put it through to the GM.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councillor Jerd. The legislation sets up a distinct difference between the role of the councillors in setting the broader and the strategic level, both policy and budget, and the administration through the general manager and the various operational staff and the structure that council adopts, does the day-to-day and the online and all of that quite overt detail. To be blunt, if you were to ask me that question I wouldn't have the answer off the top of my head either. I would need to go and research those things because that's the operational arrangement we have when you're looking at somewhere in the order of 600 staff. But there's a distinct legislative role difference between what the councillors are and then the administration and implementation of the budget that council adopts as the operational plan through the community strategic framework.
The budget, why are we the ones voting on this SV when we can't find out every little bit of information to know where exactly our budget is?
Yeah, so I mean, the overarching sort of things, like as councillors, like it's more the high level side of things. I don't know, it's a common, struggle, the operational side of things and how much detail we actually get. It's a hard one, how we do that. And I don't know if you want to comment from your side of things, General Manager, any further than that.
I'm aware with the amendments to the legislation that the Minister has requested monthly updates, which will provide in a little more detail than has previously been. There's the quarterly reports and the updates. In terms of the budgets that we apply, they're the budgets as endorsed and adopted by the council. Any changes to those need to come back through the quarterly reporting exercise, or on specific projects, they will come back to council specifically for those items that are, if you like, tender matters.
But wasn't it not in fine detail?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I thought that's what was
Just
said
repeat
before.
that, sorry.
But it wasn't in fine detail. That was what was said before.
Yeah, not
about
the line
budget.
item, like,
Yeah.
it goes back to the CFO point.
Yeah. So we're getting rough figures to make these decisions on. I just want it to be very clear to people what they see online is what we see. What are we going to do to fix the budget so that this doesn't happen again?
So that's actually one thing that we are going to discuss soon with the long-term financial plan, and I probably would like to put that through to the CFO or Director of Corporate for further commentary, but there is quite a lot of efficiency work going into detail, but I'll put it through to the CFO.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Jerd. So there's many things we are going to do to attempt to make sure we minimise any future possibility of this happening again. The first thing I would note is there's no guarantee that this won't happen again because of the regime we're in, where we are limited by a rate peg. So while ever the state government doesn't allow us to increase our rates each year by an amount equivalent to our expenditure, there is always a possibility that this will happen in the future. What we're going to do in the meantime is to focus on continuing to find efficiencies within council where there are, continue to look for other revenue sources as much as possible. And in that way, we will hope that we can minimise any future increases onto the ratepayers. But as I would note, there is no guarantee of that in the regime that we have. There's other advocacy things we can do in regards to the financial assistance grant, but a lot of those things are out of our control and in the hands of the state and federal government.
So in your opinion, what would have created this problem?
What created this problem?
Yeah.
The regime of rate pegging since 1976.
Okay. What happens to any councillor if we choose to vote no?
That's not for me.
Well, I'll put that through concise with the, I'll put it through to Director of Corporate.
In relation to a councillor votes no on this report, nothing. That is your privilege and right as a councillor to make a decision on how you vote. And it's up the same as the rest of the councillors, their privilege and right to make a decision on how they vote. But nothing is going to happen to an individual councillor that votes for or against in this motion or any other motion.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Wouldn't get sent to Office of Local Government?
Will the individual councillor get sent to the Office of Local Government?
Yeah.
No. Why would you?
It's just what we've had discussions about previously. Okay, so I'm not really for this much, and I kind of would like to do an amendment, or actually amendment, that council does not proceed with the process of the 39.9 rate increase until the following are completed and reported back to council for consideration. We appoint a new general manager and implement a staff structure review, as the acting can't do this. And 2, engage an independent audit to review the complete financial management and funding of projects with a clear understanding we need to cut costs. 3, a vote of no confidence, because I can't see where, if we can't even remember what we've stated in the press, how we ended up here, and if we had a surplus or not, something needs to change. And 4, review current projects for considerations of priorities that could be delayed due to insufficient funds while the review is ongoing.
We're just reviewing that because just part of the code of meeting practices cannot be a direct negative of the original motion.
Okay.
So I just need to, we're just clarifying.
Just a question, I think we've deferred before to find out more information.
So
Three might not be able
just
to.
had to review the code, and it appears what you have suggested and it is a direct negative. So if we can go the first portion of your amendment, or if you could reword the amendment so it's not an actual direct amendment, so it's actually amending the original, motion.
Yep, sorry, I just passed it off to, to minutes. Oh, actually, I've got a copy still on my phone.
Okay.
Sorry.
So after the new code of meeting practice rules, like there's still some,
Yeah, we're still
rules
learning.
that we need to work through, and foreshadowing was actually taken out, but it's still available as a mechanism for councillors to use. So therefore, what you can do is put your amendment, foreshadowed amendment, because it is somewhat, it's a direct negative basically of that particular item that so if this doesn't, go
Pass,
through,
that would be what
then
we'll
we can go
pass.
through to your foreshadowed amendments. That
Yep.
makes sense. So it's a bit of a technicality,
Yep.
that side of things.
I understand that.
Okay. It's not something that can be adopted by the mover and the seconder as per.
Can you just make it a little bit clearer for anybody that's listening?
Yeah, sorry. So it's not typically when an amendment would go forward, it'd have to be adopted or approved by the mover and the seconder of the motion. But because it's actually a direct negative of what we're discussing right now, it means that what the council would need to do is foreshadow a motion. So if this doesn't go through as written, then we can deal with the foreshadow motion. But if it goes through, then the foreshadow motion is like it didn't exist. I hope that's clear. It's a little bit, it's been taken out of the code, but it's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Foreshadow brackets. So we've got some language. We're just going to put that up on the screen so that's clear.
You might not.
We can continue debate. So we'll continue debate. We've got the foreshadow motion there ready when if we need to. Yep.
I just want to point out they might. I'm not sure if point 3 will be able to go through or not if they can't take it off. I just want to make it very clear to all the residents out there. Us councillors here, nobody here wants to be in this position. I sure as hell would love to give up my seat to anybody that would like to take it. The fact that we can't get full transparency with the budget and know every little bit about it, I don't feel it should be a council's position to make a decision on this. I feel like the people that run our budget every day should be the ones here facing the public. They're the ones that should be making the decision, not us. And I therefore can't support it. There's too many people in this town that have reached out to me saying that they are not in a good position if this was to go through. If it was a smaller percentage, then I'd understand. But the fact that it's quite a huge percentage, and this is going to drive a lot of people off their properties. And I feel like the only people that are winning is the developer. I feel like we have a state initiative here to build houses. We've been told how many times that they want to build here. I feel like us having a rate increase is going to push a lot of people off big lots of land because they're not going to be able to afford it. So, therefore, no.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jerd. Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd just like to say how wonderful it is to see so many people in the gallery tonight, and how fantastic it is that people are finally starting to take interest in what is happening in their local area and also all levels of government. I would also like to remind everyone that as a councillor, we actually live in this LGA, and the decision that is being made here tonight and any other night affects us all as well. And I just want you to be assured that, and I can only speak for myself, every decision that we make is well thought through, and we go through every piece of information we receive and try to make the best decision that we can in the time frame that we get. I'd also like to add that I don't think we need that I think we do need some kind of rate rise to get council back on track, but I also think before we go and ask for a 39.9% raise, that we really need to have a good look at the budget, and we need to cut more. We need to cut into the things that are not necessary. And some of those things are the cycleways, dog parks, skate parks, and all the things that are wonderful but are not necessary. If we just keep throwing more money at the problem, nothing is ever going to change. And I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. So if IPART determines the rate percentage, can this percentage be below the suggested amount of 39.9%?
My understanding is that, yes, it can. Like we can, but then everything would have to go back on public exhibition, your operational plan, your delivery program. Unless there's some additional commentary from CFO or Director of Corporate, if I've got that correct. Put it through to the CFO just for a bit more additional commentary.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Councillor Dixon. The determination by IPART is a maximum percentage. The council is allowed to choose to apply a lower one, but contrary to other ordinary rate peg years, you don't get a chance to catch it up. That is to say, if it was 39.9% and the council only wanted to do 30%, you couldn't. That final 10% is permanently forgone. You'd have to go for another special variation to get it back.
Yep, okay, thank you. And also, can the percentage determined by IPART be adjusted by councillors? Or once the percentage is determined, council must abide by the IPART's decision?
Just to clarify, I think that might be the same
Yeah, I
answer
think
you
I just
received for that.
dipped my question there because I just got that answered. But so we as councillors can determine that percentage, or is that going to be dictated by council?
CFO? Oh, Director?
The final decision is council, the elected members.
Yep. Okay, and also, as councillors, will we still be given the opportunity to trim the budget of non-essentials?
Well, I know there is a lot of work coming through, and we're going to discuss that with the long-term financial plan to start with, but I'll put it through to Director again.
Thank you. As per any year, the operational plan as it's been developed, inclusive of the budget, will be brought to council and is put out on public exhibition. In this case, if council elects to support the recommendation from tonight and apply to IPART, the document that goes out as part of our yearly budget operations will include two components. One is a business as usual budget, if you like, for want of a better word, and then a budget with the special variation included. And that goes out as part of our operational plan for public exhibition, and council will be involved in the setting of that and ultimately is the decision maker in relation to the high-level budget documents that are there that are modelled on and prescribed under the quarterly budget review statements. So what we provide to councillors is essentially what we put up or have to put up in relation to the quarterly budget review, which is a review of the adopted budget as prescribed by the Office of Local Government.
Okay, thank you.
Saw there was Councillor Madden. Do you have a question? Just get you off mute, Councillor Madden. You're just on mute. You just muted yourself again, I think. This is flashbacks to COVID. Still definitely okay. We got you.
Thank you, Mayor Watton. I have a question for the CFO. So I understand that Professor Drew spent 6 months determining a rate rise due to our council's financial situation, and I haven't personally completed any cumulative figures. But as a better look for the ratepayers, a smaller increase of, say, 15, 15, 10 would certainly ease the initial pain. But I do believe the Professor did entertain the idea of staggered increase as a possibility. Why was this not undertaken at the time, and could you elaborate for our ratepayers? And in no means, again, I don't want to see any cuts to our parks, gardens, and sporting fields, but the exact opposite of what was previously said.
CFO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councillor Madden. So Professor Drew did consider a multi-year special variation across 2 years. The reason his recommendation is to go for 39.9% for the 1 year is driven by the fact that council would have limited borrowing capacity to be able to cover the gaps that we need to cover in the short term, and plus it ends up being a larger headline rate in the way that the IPART guidelines require us to report the percentage. So it would actually look potentially like something 50% over 2 years instead of 40% over 1 year, which I know sounds contrary to what's actually happening, but that's how it's required to be reported. And the other part is, across the multiple years, you never actually get the cash back because of the actual time value of money. Once Professor Drew considered all those options, he determined that our sustainability position required us to have that permanent 1 year increase.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, Mayor Watton. Look, I would just want to be honest about where I stand. I do not support higher rates in principle, and I am deeply uncomfortable with the impact this will have on people in our community. People that I speak to regularly, who have emailed or phoned me, the people that I represent. I have listened carefully to those residents who are worried how they will cope with a rate increase of this magnitude. Many are already stretched, and I can understand why this proposal has caused frustration and anxiety. I feel that tension myself. I feel it in the room. If there were a responsible alternative that did not involve asking more from ratepayers, I would support it without hesitation. I also want the community to know that this alternative, or this SRV, has not come forward lightly. In the past and more recently, council has investigated cost-saving measures. Projects have been prioritised and many deferred or discontinued to reduce expenditure. I understand, as Councillor Dixon questioned, there is areas for more reduction, and I think it's something that we really do as a council need to focus on to lessen the impact to residents. But let's be real, even with these measures in place, the reality still remains confronting. Council is still projected at our current plans to operate at a deficit. Simply put, our income will not be sufficient to meet our ongoing obligations. And that is why I am reluctantly supporting this motion. Not because it's easy, and it's certainly not popular, but because at this point, it's the most responsible option available. As councillors, we have a duty not only to reflect the concerns of our community, but also to confront the financial reality and act in the long-term interests of the area. But I also want to be clear about what this motion tonight does and what it does not do. If this motion is passed tonight, it allows council to make an application to IPART. It does not lock in the outcome. IPART will independently assess the application and councillors will have the final decision on the size or reducing the size approved of what IPART approved. So I strongly encourage residents, if this motion is passed tonight, to make submissions directly to IPART. This process matters and it provides a genuine opportunity for community voices to be heard, independently heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrington. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mayor Watton. Apologies if I've been a little unwell, my voice is a little hoarse. If I may cough, please excuse the interruption. I wanted to speak as well in a similar vein to Councillor Mason's opening remarks around the history of rate pegging and lack of increases made by previous councils in relation to this decision tonight. It's been discussed at length between councillors and council staff, the impact of previous councils not implementing any rate increases, but I generally do not hold that against them. As Councillor Mason stated in their day, it was never a good time to increase rates, as it isn't now for us. However, I envision a future council making very much the same comments in relation to this term if the situation is to continue on as it has. Some comments as well in relation to Councillor Dixon's remarks. There has been a great deal of work done by council staff over almost 8 to 9 months this year since the beginning of this process was initiated, and a first report from our independent external professors reviewing our financial position was put forward in June or July. And one of the supplementary enclosures to this month's meeting includes a breakdown of upwards of $107 million worth of projects which have been scoped out of Council's 10-year financial plan in a way to reprioritise funding towards spending that our community has most repeatedly expressed to us as being their highest priority, that of roads and transport infrastructure. These projects, as Councillor Dixon stated, are often ones that we would normally encourage investment in, but have been decided to be under a lower priority within this review, including a number of skate parks planned around the LGA, sporting field upgrades, and other amenity upgrades to areas around our LGA. In addition to that, the supplementary enclosures also talk about efforts that have been undertaken by our staff to address efficiencies in spending or in reductions in spending, revenue or reductions in spending to help our financial position in a long-term solution. So the document details $2.4 million worth of efficiency initiatives, be that additional revenue that's being able to be raised through fees and charges that have historically been underclaimed by council in a way to try to assist across the community but have worsened our financial position in the long run. And also some reductions in expenses primarily within the areas of employee costs and materials and contracts. There's also information that outlines Council's ongoing plans within this new 10-year financial outlook to freeze staffing numbers, the full-time equivalency of those total positions that exist within Council at this time for the next 5 years, and to limit the expansion of those positions in the following 5 years considerably. In the end, there's a small section around the overall assessment of the sustainability of Council and marking back to something that Councillor Mason expressed in his opening statement regarding the long-term effect of neglection for maintenance on assets, especially roads. That's been an area that has soaked up much of the financial strain over the last 10 to 15 years in result of no increase to rates and revenue coming into Council. And I think much of the community would agree that that's been quite visible, the impact that that reduction in maintenance and spending has had on roads around our local community. All us councillors drive the same roads as the residents and use the same facilities as the residents, and we've noticed that impact over time. I will likely join the majority of my colleagues here around the horseshoe in my discomfort over the past 9 months in having to deal with this decision, and I imagine that we all share the same position that none of us have been eager to come to our conclusion for tonight's meeting. But I believe that if our council were to continue in repeating the previous decisions made to push back increases and to not address issues in our spending and our asset maintenance where it exists, future generations and future councils will be much worse off than we are now.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I can't believe we're here. I want to start off with expressing my absolute violent opposition against this motion tonight. We went from one extreme to another extreme where little more than 12 months ago, everything was great. Largest capital expenditure in our region. Cash to splash was the headlines everywhere. And then we went, and remember, I'm the guy that was pointing out we have a deficit issue that's growing in this council and that we need to look at it and start doing something about it. But now we've completely went to another extreme where we want a nearly 40% increase in one hit that's permanent. Right now, the real life impacts of this is residents is going to cop an average rate rise of $596. Farmers is going to cop a $1,300 increase. Businesses is going to cop a $2,000 increase. Doesn't that seem like an unreasonable impact on our community? Because of mismanagement over past years, I don't believe for a second that this is the only option to get council out of this situation. Surely there's got to be a different way that has a reasonable impact on our community. I mean, I'm not saying there's not a need to address the situation, like I've explained before. But even if you look at some of the savings in our long-term financial plan that we'll talk about later that was proposed, there's a mention where cuts have been made to the program. The Lovedale Link, $15 million. The Southern Corridor Bypass, $40 million. Now, those things, as far as I know, was concepts. They were never budgeted for. There was never any plans for them. It's a fictional cut. It doesn't actually exist, but here we got a $55 million saving for council. So I think we're now stuck where under the Local Government Act, we have to make sure that this council remains financially sustainable. But I also say that under the Local Government Act, we are also required to act in the best interest of all of our residents in this LGA. So this is going to come down to a decision tonight, and I don't buy the whole spiel that it's not the councillors that's making this decision, because we are deciding right now. We're going to vote whether we apply for a 40% rate increase or not. That's what's happening. And it's going to come down to whether you decide saving the institution or looking out for the residents' best interest. That's what councillors is deciding on tonight. And anything else you tell yourself to make yourself feel better that this is the right choice to make, it's not. You were elected here tonight to make the decisions that the residents of this community want you to enforce. And I, for one, don't want a 40% increase. I think there should have been a lot more work done to have a look at where we can make better savings. Can we expand this over a longer period of time? The whole long-term financial plan and every other document lines up exactly for this one specific scenario. If the professor considered a scenario where we'd done it over 3 years, why wasn't that scenario as well thought out in the long-term financial plan as an option for council to look at for an application? Because we say now that it can come back to council if it gets approved by IPART, and then we can determine if we make it 40% or not. But what everyone's missing is our long-term financial plan, and all the other documents that supported this thing is set for the 40% increase. That means they have to change all of their financial plans and put them all out on exhibition, and it all has to be approved by us again. So good luck with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a few questions, if I may. We've heard tonight about delayed capital works programs and internal efficiencies that have been found as part of our sustainability efforts. Perhaps can you provide some clarity on the type of works and the scope of works that have been delayed? I know Councillor Hills mentioned a couple there when he was talking, and about those internal efficiencies and what they look like, to give the community some idea of the type of cuts that have already been made prior to this decision.
Yeah, sure. So there were figures that were mentioned, the $110 million, there's quite exhaustive figures there. I might look to get some further commentary from our Director of Works, if you want to talk about some specifics. He's sitting over there to the right. Director.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor Hill, Councillor Lee. I'll do my best to answer that in detail. Obviously, the list of projects or capital projects are within the long-term financial plan, so I won't get into details about those. But internally, Council's reduced its construction teams down to 2 to manage the reduced capital works program that we envisage moving forward. Those projects are being reprioritised and have been reprioritised as part of looking into sustainable capital works and operational maintenance works program moving forward. You would have been privy to the unsealed roads review that was presented late last year. That's one mechanism of council internally looking at ways in which it can maximise and provide a more efficient service to the community and its network. Some of the other means are looking at how we can undertake maintenance in a more proactive way, looking at ways in which we can accelerate some of the maintenance activities with respect to potholes versus stabilisation works. Project specifics are still being worked out, obviously, because we have next year's budget that we're working through. So, and the need for us to be flexible at this point in time. But as an example, our capital works program over the last 2 years has been in the order of $70 million. Moving forward, would be reducing that to $20 to $30 million in order to maintain a level of service, but also to manage the expenditure moving forward.
Thank you.
Just before we go on, Councillor Lee, would you just get the CFO commentary on the efficiencies, just to get a more robust answer to your question, CFO?
Thank you. Can I just check, Councillor Lee, are you talking about past efficiencies or the efficiencies we have identified for the future?
The ones we've identified for
the ones for the
future.
Yeah, so there's a various list as put in the Appendix 1 document that went out on Monday on our website that I would welcome people to have a look at. Broadly, it's looking at increasing our revenue by looking at where fees and charges don't quite either meet the market or should be increased just a little bit higher, a little bit more of a user pays type aspect. And that's particularly, in areas like the airport. There's some regulatory services part. There's a little bit in finance as well, where we can improve just some of our returns. Then there's other service efficiencies that shouldn't really see, so it's looking to save expenditure, but really shouldn't see any significant changes in service. So by that, we may not mow sports grounds on weekends anymore and pay overtime, and looking at being a little bit more strategic in overtime use. Looking a little bit at plant and fleet, what aspects of plant we're using efficiently, whether it's better to hire or hold those pieces of plant anymore. And that's pretty much what's outlined in there. Same with IT, customer service, how we can kind of more maximise our hours without having to go over and above where our FTE budget is, and really minimise overtime, which really shouldn't dramatically affect services significantly.
Thank you. I'm sure that many will be pleased to know that we've looked internally for those efficiencies already before having to make this decision tonight. Mr Mayor, as part of this process, all councillors received a capacity to pay report, which was provided by the independent advisors. Are we able to get perhaps a summary of that for those that are here with us in the gallery tonight or those watching online at home as to what that indicated and what that information looked like that was provided to councillors?
can give you my abridged version, but I'll have to put it through to the subject expert. That'll be able to explain it a lot more, so I'll put it through to the CFO.
I do not pretend to be a subject matter expert when it was written by an economist, but anyway, the capacity to pay report looks at the entire tax take of the LGA and determines where the current position of the LGA is in regards to its peers or its state or across the Commonwealth level. So when I say it looks at the entire tax take, it looks at Commonwealth, state, local government taxes, every single input in there, and then compares where we stand in regards to the average. The capacity to pay report shows that we are lower than the average and that there is capacity to pay, and I'm using this broadly because it does not look at it at an individual level, but there is a capacity to pay within the LGA of somewhere between 5 and 6%. But again, caution must be noted, it's based on averages, and each individual person would have a different outcome.
Thank you. I appreciate you speaking to a report that you didn't write, as you mentioned. Perhaps just lastly, Mr. Mayor, a couple of recurring themes on social media that I'm sure we've all seen in the last week or two. Perhaps you'll be able to provide some clarity yourself on these ones for the community. Many have called for external auditing of council's books. Can you confirm if that already does or doesn't happen?
Yes, so we do have our regular ARIC review, Audit Risk and Committee. So that's independent of council. We have one councillor who's a non-voting member, and then the rest is external, and any councillor is available to attend that. So, and the New South Wales Audit Office as well, of course. So they'll go through everything. So there's quite a few checks and balances there. And notwithstanding too that we did vote on Professor Joseph Drew, who in my opinion is independent, went through things quite exhaustively, told some hard truths. So there's been quite a few checks and balances.
Thank you. Regarding the Wollongong Road upgrade project, it's one that I regularly see, particularly in the last 10 to 14 days, that all the rate money's been blown on that particular project. Can you confirm if ratepayers have funded that project or whether it was developer funds and government grants?
Yep, I will put it through to the CFO. But yeah, developer contributions, grants, federal, state, but I'll put it through for more exhaustive information.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Wollongong Road upgrade project has no general funding slated for it by a council. That is to say, no rate income is put towards it. It is funded through grants and developer contributions and a contribution from Hunter Water.
Thank you.
No further questions. We are approaching 45 minutes. We've got 3 minutes to 45 minutes, and that's our code of meeting practice limit of debate. Before we do, would you like to have a right of reply before we put this forward for a vote? Okay, well, I think everything's been said exhaustively to time, both sides. So we'll put it forward for a vote now. So all in favour of what's on the screen, motion? Councillor Dunn, Harrington, Hill, Lee, Mason, Pamalski, Pascoe, Hawkins and Watton. Those against? Councillor Dixon, Jerd and King. It's carried. Oh, sorry, and Madden in favour. Is Madden against? So Madden's against. Okay. Now moving on to rescission motion. So with regards to report BN 19/2025, the suspension of all non-legislated net zero expenditure to support financial sustainability. So just to confirm that we're voting for a rescission, not an actual form of motion. So if I could have, we'll put that forward for a vote. Oh, we'll need a mover and a seconder first. So moved Councillor Hill, seconded Councillor Pamalski. We'll now put that forward for a vote in favour of rescission. Those in favour? Councillor Dunn, Hill, Lee, Pamalski, Pascoe, Hawkins and Madden. Those against? Councillor Dixon, Harrington, Jerd, King, Mason and Watton. So we'll now deal with that matter. Yep.
move the second for that.
Yep. So I'll need to get a mover and seconder for this. So could I get someone to move Councillor Hill? Second, Councillor Palmosky. Speaking, Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mayor Watton. Just to speak briefly about the motion that's written there on the screen for the interest of the other councillors and anyone in the gallery at home. The original motion, as it stood, having now been rescinded, restricted council for any spending on initiatives which in the resolution were flagged as net zero, but as I understood it to be within a particular plan of council that was referenced to some extent at the last council meeting. My concern was around the mechanism in which that motion and that resolution stood to individually restrict council spending from a single plan's perspective, a plan that, as far as I could find in all my research, had no individual line items or any money allocated to it within our currently adopted delivery program, and was something that I believe on the night in the December meeting, many councillors were probably unaware of the extent of the plan itself. And so the motion as it stands there is simply to note that the ongoing review that we have into financial sustainability to address questions and comments made around the previous motion's intent to reduce spending, which I think may have some merit in the future, but I believe that Council needed the opportunity to be provided information on the climate change resilience plan and what it included, as well as what actions and any monies that were assigned to them in possible future budgets would act to do. Just speaking briefly on the plan itself, it has a great number of actions that fall within it over a possible 25-year time span. Some of these actions do have estimated dollar amounts next to them. However, this plan is simply a document that is to guide council in its making of budgets and operational plans in future, and the plan itself does not commit council to spending until these line items are included in future budgets. There was some discussion last month about the cost of the plan, of the spending within the plan and the possible forecast savings, which I believe had been stated to be a loss for council in the future. However, the previous reports on this plan indicate that an initial investment of $15 million over the course of 25 years would result in a net increase in council's position of approximately $6 million. Of course, it's difficult to estimate the accuracy of cost movements within a 25-year period, and of course that could be above or below what the actual reality of it is. The other thing that I would note is that there's been further advice from staff around what impact the previous resolution as it stood may have had in council's ability to receive grant funding. Council is able to achieve a great number of positive projects through the use of grant funding, such as some within this plan that have previously begun and would hopefully see continue, involving the replacement of lighting across our entire LGA with more energy efficient LED bulbs. There was a concern that with a resolution of council calling for the halting of all spending surrounding net zero initiatives, that applications for future grants may be affected when that is expressed to the grant body that council has an ongoing resolution to halt spending in those areas. And so I would be eager to see, as the motion states, a workshop held to help all councillors become more aware of what is within this plan. And of course, I would encourage all councillors, when we are undergoing our yearly budgeting procedures later this year, to ensure that if there are items that are flagged attached to this plan with spending next to them that we disagree on, then that should be expressed and withdrawn from that budget at that time. Or added to the budget at that time in a more structural manner, as opposed to attempting to block large swathes of council actions under certain plans as the previous resolution had done.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Jode.
Thank you, Mayor. I sent an email in this morning to ask for more information. At the last council meeting, I asked about emissions, and it was either said that would take it on notice or you weren't sure of the answer. I just can't remember. Going off the climate change policy on council's website, 6.14 and 6.15 say we should have this data. 614 clearly states that develop a Cessnock greenhouse gas emission inventory using regional data and establish baseline emissions for the region, undertake regular monitoring so that council knows if the actions being employed to reduce emissions are succeeding and can amend actions if required, and 615 undertake an annual corporate greenhouse gas emission inventory including Scope 1 and Scope 2, so direct and indirect emissions utilising the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Act. Does council know yet how much emissions they produce, how much they save, and why it's important to have this policy?
I believe it's actually, it is itemised in the report, but if I can put that through, yeah, put through to the General Manager.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Jett, the original report and the plan has the council emissions and the targets that go with that. Off the top of my head, but I know if I might defer, do you have that, the current, what the emissions were programmed and what we currently are at? Mark, please. If I might refer to Mark Mannings, one of our principal environmental.
Okay, I'll put it through to the back there.
Yes, that's correct. We are tracking our greenhouse gas emissions yearly, and the most recent ones are a reduction of about 9% compared to 2019.
Okay. We taxpayers already are paying when it comes to state. It's spending on climate change initiatives. Total investment, when you have a little bit of a look, $2 billion over 10 years with the Commonwealth Government as part of the Net Zero plan. Just some of these is the Net Zero Industry Innovation Program, where it's over $1 billion, with $360 million for decarbonisation in manufacturing and mining. Net Zero Manufacturing Initiative is a $480 million, with $275 million in grants for clean technology and renewable manufacturing, announced in February 2024. These are our tax dollars paying for this. That's just a couple, so I don't run out of time. My point is, this is double dipping. The taxpayer is paying for this when it comes to state, yet at a council that is struggling so badly and needs a 39.9% rate increase, should we be asking the ratepayer to pay for this? We are already looking after the planet with net zero in Parliament. It does not need to be at a council level expecting more money from the taxpayer.
Councillor Jode, Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to clarify, so the first time when the net zero plan was brought to council, it was modelling that showed that there will be additional expenditure of $15 million, I believe was the figure. And it's discretionary spending is the point I'm trying to highlight here. So $15 million over 25 years of discretionary spending that council will spend on this plan. Now, my motion that I brought to council last week to suspend all of that, if you go and watch last week's video, is not about to cut the program. It doesn't mean that we're not going to pursue all of the lovey-dovey net zero targets anymore. What it means is that every project that comes to council will be checked at the gate. There will be a cost-benefit analysis done and council will approve it, which means we can control the spending. Everything that's greenwashed doesn't just get waved through because there's a policy that's supporting that position. So we just, in the previous motion, decided to apply for a rate increase of 40%. And now you want to reverse a decision that council approved last month where you want to spend $15 million in discretionary funds. I just don't think, it doesn't make sense, particularly in our financial situation that we're in now. So, you know, have a look at the councillors that votes this in again.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Pascoe.
Thank you, Mayor Watton. I was just wondering if we could get a little bit of a recap on the Director's commentary regarding that additional $15 million. Just looking at our notes from last month, it says basically this is a maybe, that there might be a $15 million expenditure over the next 25 years, but it was all pretty hypothetical. Can we get a recap on that?
Put it through to the author of the commentary, the General Manager.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and Councillor Pascoe. Yet the plan talks about it, and Councillor King is correct, the discretionary 15. It also modelled that on the basis of that spend that you would get a return of in the order of $21 million, so a net positive. Notwithstanding that, it's a plan that's adopted, and in each case we would need to Councillor King's point, put it through a process to check it at the gate to see that it still made sense. And when we're talking about 5 or 6 years after that plan was first adopted, the obvious ones that we've been dealing with have been with street lighting, movement to LED, and obviously with the waste facility, because that's one of our largest emitters. But any of those matters, to your point, in that plan identified that 15 would be plus 6 million returned. But to Councillor King's point, these have all got to be discretionary and brought back through here as specific projects as we manage that sustainability across the financials of the business.
Yeah, thank you. So my sort of understanding was not that there's necessarily a problem with cutting net zero projects. It was just that with this motion saying that we were suspending everything, that's where the problem became with grant funding requests. Is that right?
I kind of say perhaps. I mean, and it might just come down to, as officers of the organisation, we're familiar with some of the terminology in the language and what that means, and to the layperson reading that plan, it might look like a commitment when I can confirm that it's, and Councillor King's used the term discretion, it will need to come back, any of those kind of spends would come back before the chamber.
Yeah, beautiful. So I appreciate this coming back because it gave me a chance to actually look into it further, because the climate change resilience plan wasn't something that I had delved into previously. I'm all for cutting anything that will save us money. So if there was a project to come up that had to do with the net zero expenditure that isn't a necessity, like we've been discussing, it's something that us as councillors are able to stop. If there's something in that plan that we don't want to do, we just need to bring it up to a meeting. The problem that I have with going back to the original motion was that at the moment in the climate change resilience plan, there's only one line item that has a cost, and that's the street lighting, because these things haven't come up yet. So in that instance where changing out street lighting is actually saving us money, I don't want to see us put a blanket ban on doing something that in the long term is actually beneficial, because even though we are outlaying a small cost, we are recouping that. And that seems to be what I'm taking from your comments from the GM, is that we may be spending up to 15 million as an example, but we would be recuperating some of that cost if we are reducing solar and things like that. So I much prefer this one where we are doing a workshop so that we can actually be informed of what is going to happen, and to have the ability to bring items to council to say, look, we've found this and it's not going to work, rather than put a blanket ban on everything.
Thank you, Councillor Pascoe. Councillor, you got a question?
With Councillor Pascoe bringing it up about the street lighting, if we vote in favour of Quinton's original one, right, so say I vote against whatever's up there, and stick to the original where it didn't pass, right, we don't go and take out the street lighting that's already in.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor, no, it would be a matter of anything that's available in terms up to that point and spent, and the benefits and savings we get from there. The ongoing future was something that would need to be looked at, and available funding elsewhere may not be. So, no, we don't go and take anything that's been expended, and any benefits that we are accruing from that will continue to accrue.
The other thing, though, too, is these items that we were asking to come to council, would they normally see councillors light of day anyway if we didn't stick to Quinton's original norm?
Look, I don't know all of the detail on within the plan, but any of those specific projects over any of our expenditure limits, which are reasonably diminished now, they would come back before council. I think the workshop, if I can say, entering into the debate, the workshop's a good opportunity for a lot of the newer councillors to get more familiar with that and for the work that Mark and the team have been doing to give you some sense. But those larger projects would need to be more fully costed, and that would need to be looked at not just by those that are in the environment space, but those that are in the financial space to make sure it made sense. There are lots of assumptions within those reports, as they need to be in that strategy space, but we would need to justify and ensure that, and a lot of those decisions would come here. But I think that when we can flesh that out more in the concept of a workshop, which I quite like as an alternate for now.
If we got rid of the climate resilient policy, would it not be still covered under the Hunter Regional Planning document? Because a lot of that is about solar, climate change.
There you go, General Manager.
Thank you. I'd need to take that. My understanding is that sits at a more broader principle level, that then each of the local councils will adopt a more specific plan that addresses those strategies and principles, but puts into action within the context of whichever local government area it is. We would then need to look at specific projects that would address that. Ultimately, those things would come back before. At the risk of entering the debate again, as long as it makes good financial sense, then we ought to be bringing it to the floor of the chamber, and we ought to be implementing it ourselves. Whether it's under a heading of a net zero or otherwise, we need to be doing that in the current climate that we're in.
Okay, thank you.
So Councillor Hill, we've got Councillor Hawkins before we close.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm not, what was it, violently opposed, I think was the term tonight. I'm not violently opposed to net zero and the concept, but I'm not completely sold on it, fully committed to it either. What I am committed to, though, is that at the council level, local government level, we're not affecting state or federal policy here. What we're doing is we're acknowledging that there are schemes available that will save us money. That's what my commitment, I guess, and it's a commitment to the ratepayers. I didn't put solar panels on my house to save the planet. I put them on there to save on my power bill. And I think that from council's perspective, whether you're opposed to net zero, whether you agree with it, whatever, you can quote about billions of federal government dollars to be spent wherever they want to go. If there's schemes available to council that can save us money, whether that's a scheme available for electric vehicle charging stations, if that's what they're going to come out with, we should take it. We should take it because for more broader, even than saving the planet for electric vehicles, as a tourism incentive, that's something we should be looking at. Wherever these things can cross over, we should be saying, we're open to it, we'll have a look at it, we want it. So in committing to our climate change resilience plan, we're indicating that we're on board. Whether we're on board philosophically or not, we're on board for things we can do to save our local community money. That's, to me, where it's important. Whatever the reason that they're offering these grants for, whatever the program is, whatever the new technology is, I think we should grab it with both hands. And that's why I will be, I'm not a huge supporter of it, but I'm a huge supporter of being involved in a scheme that's going to save money for our organisation. And I think that in turning our back for whatever reason at whatever level of government you think you want to influence, this is us and this is where we should be focusing what we can do. So I'll be supporting this. And I think that all of these advantages will come out in a workshop. There's questions that I'm sure we all have on the detail within the Climate Change Resilience Plan and what its implications are for grant funding, what supporting this plan indicates to the next tier of government, the next levels of the Hunter Region Plan and all of those plans, where it ties in. So I don't think it's beneficial to our ratepayers to say this is a federal policy we oppose or a state policy we oppose. Who cares? This is a system that is on offer to us and we should be embracing it.
Councillor Jones, just mindful you've had 2 bites of the cherry, so okay.
Councillor Hawkins, can I ask you, when you first started with your statement, you said something about state. We don't have. Did you say we don't have to do it with the state, or I can't remember exactly what you said. You said something about state requirements. Your very first start of the statement, you were talking about Anyway, my question is, like, what is our state legislation obligations in regard to climate change? Because in the climate policy, it says 4.4, all councils are required to prepare local plans that are consistent with New South Wales state policies. So, yeah, no, but I couldn't remember what you said, if you said yes or no. That's all I was asking.
Okay. All right. So we'll put the question there. Councillor King.
Please. Just a question for the General Manager. In relation to discretionary spending, is Council's responsibility, area of responsibility, roads, rate and rubbish? True or false? Let me rephrase. Is Council's area of responsibility roads, and rubbish? Yes or no?
I just want to chime in just really quick. I know it's directed for the General Manager, but when you look at the scope of works of what Council does, it's huge. Some would say bigger than Ben-Hur, and that's not including the cost shifting and things that come onto us from other levels of government, which we've mentioned before. But you've got, parks, you've got cemeteries, you've got economic development team, you've got, you name it, pretty much councils across it, the pack. But General Manager, you might want to chime in there. Are we specifically just roads, rates and rubbish, or did I answer that enough?
Thank you. At the risk of being, it would be nice if it was just roads, rates and rubbish. There's somewhere in the order of 127 different pieces of legislation that apply. More recently, councillors may have seen obviously on the tragic incident in Bondi and the Premier's announcement that they're going to address hate speech in places of public worship, and they were saying that local councils will be enforcing that for them. I asked the question that roads, rates and rubbish might be easier, Councillor King, but there are many other responsibilities by dint of legislation that fall our way. Hence, a lot of the issues we deal with in this regard aren't just roads, rates and rubbish, as you've seen through your time on council.
Thank you.
Gosh, that's a whole other debate that we're not going to answer in right now. I guess philosophy aside, the point that I'm interested in is I want more workshops. Since I've been elected, it's workshops that I've been requesting. I believe we need more. We've got a code of meeting practice that we're battling right now where briefings, if you're not aware, are basically factored out. For that reason, philosophy aside, I want to support that because there's a workshop there to inform councils. I think that's a good thing to adopt. So that being said, debate's closed. We'll put the matter forward for a vote. So all in favour? Councillor Dunn, Kill, Lee, Mason, Palmowski, Pascoe, Hawkins and Watton. Those against? Councillor Dixon, Harrington, Jerd and King. It's carried. Now moving on to CC1 /2026, this is the adoption of the long-term financial plan 26 to 36. Could I have someone to please move that? Councillor Hill, seconded Councillor Lee. Any discussion? Councillor Jerd.
I just got a quick question. It was actually nice to get the full submission. Is that something that we're going to be getting from now on when we do something out on Expedition, that we'll actually get a copy of the full submission?
I know I've seen that that's a full submission that we've got there, but you mean like the summary that we usually get, the staff summary?
Yeah, because I don't really like the breakdown summary. I'd like to get like full submissions.
Sure. Is that something we can speak on? General Manager.
I mean, quite often certainly my experience with the planning, so the DA and the like, they're provided and available as appendices. They are public documents, so they are available to be provided to councillors. We tend not to include a lot of them in the business paper because you end up with a 1,000+ page business paper. On the key items like long-term financials and the like, I'm happy to undertake to provide that, but they are available more broadly. They will all be summarised and included in the council report in relation to matters where public exhibition has occurred.
Could they be put just even if it was on the hub?
Can I take that on notice and look into that?
Yeah,
please?
just because it was really nice, because when, somebody else is nitpicking little bits out of there, there might be something that makes more sense when you read the whole story. Look, we've just voted on the whole I part and we don't really know what they're going to come back with. I really feel like this item should be deferred because this is talking about a 10-year long-term plan and we don't know what IPARC's going to say. They could turn around and say 20%, they could say 10%, they could say, yeah, you definitely get the 39.9%. So I just kind of feel we're a little bit horse before the cart, or no, the cart before the horse, sorry, in this situation, and I would like to defer this report.
I understand your premise there to want to defer, but the issue is that this application needs to be in by the 2nd of February, which the LTFP does need to be endorsed. So I don't think it'll be done based on time factor. That's my take on that anyway. I don't think it could actually occur. Is there any further commentary? So the time's against it. Okay. CFO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So one of the requirements of the application to IPART is that we do have a long-term financial plan that aligns with the community engagement, the asset management plans and the asset management strategies, all of which are now in alignment. The final part is to have a long-term financial plan adopted by council. It's been on exhibition for the last, since November. The long-term financial plan is not just set up for the special variation. It also includes a base case that is what our budget will be based on if we do not get a special variation. So what the changes we will make if we are limited to a 3.8% rate peg. So in that sense, it's not just a document that is completely tied to the SV. The other scenarios in there, particularly scenario 1 and scenario 4, are fairly guiding contributions as well. So scenario 1 shows how much we would actually have to borrow to be able to meet all the commitments to keep our assets at a suitable state. And that shows that we would never have the capacity to borrow at that level and what the ultimate repayments would be, which is just completely unsustainable for council. And scenario 4 is the one that shows a prospect of what another future special variation may hold. All of those are not in play. The only one we know at this moment in time is that we have a rate peg approved for 3.8%, and that is what the base case is, and that is what one of the budgets will be drafted on.
Okay. So what is our borrowing capacity? Because one of the last conversations we had lots of opportunities to borrow. Now is it 0? Is that why we're doing the 39?
Can I just ask for a point of order, Mr. Mayor, while we're waiting?
Order.
Can we?
Oh, there you go.
Thank you. Can we just clarify, is it in the code of meeting practice where a councillor is allowed to be refused to move a deferral motion? Technical question? Because I believe councillor...
I don't know if she proposed moving the deferrals, more asking a question about it, so I didn't actually see or hear, but if that was the intention, to actually put it forward for a vote for deferring, then yes.
Yeah, I did say could we defer it until we got back from IPART, and then the CFO said something about we can't.
Yeah, because I guess the thing is, because it is bundled together that application and motion being on the floor and dealing with that matter, and it is time sensitive. Technically, there could be. I'll put it through to CFO, but my understanding is it's a bit interesting.
Okay. There's 2 questions there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor, to your point, Councillor King, there's a motion on the floor that needs to be dealt with, but if you were looking then to move a deferral motion, that's a matter for the floor, Council. In terms of your question, Councillor Jurt, around if IPART provides a number other than those numbers that is in the long-term financial plan, we would need to come back, recast the entire budget, recast the long-term financial plan and its supporting documents, put that back out on exhibition and harass councillors quite a lot in the end of May and June in order to get that adopted and endorsed for operation of the business going forward into July. So if IPARC come up with a different number, there's a lot of work for us to do, which will be coming to you for consideration.
So does that mean it doesn't seem like it matters then if we do defer it from what you just
I
said?
would suggest that it does, because this is the long-term financial plan that supports the application, both for the 3.8% and the application for the increase of the 39.9. And it now aligns that particular additional effort with the asset management plans and the asset management strategy documents. If the number then changes, we need to recast all of that, and that will be work we'll need to bring to council.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I'll have a think.
Okay, Councillor King.
I just had a question on the original motion. There was a submission made there where there was names redacted from it. I'm just asking, why are we redacting names and submissions? You know, because it was about, the long-term financial plan. Our mate was, telling us how good he is in finances, but how do I know it's not our local lollipop man, writing this riveting piece of literature for us?
Well, general privacy, but I'll get the concise breakdown from Director of Corporate.
Thank you, Mayor Watton. You've nailed it. It's a privacy issue in relation to publishing personal information, which is that individual's name and his position within the organisation identified in the submission. So that's why it's redacted.
Okay, sorry, I'm supposed to take weight from someone's opinion who I'm not allowed to know who that person is as part of our official documentation.
Thank you, Councillor King. Essentially, yes, because we come over into that whole range of what we need to do in relation to us disclosing personal information, and the privacy area is a minefield for an organisation such as ourselves. So we had to redact that individual's name. Certainly we can look at whether we could have some confidential information potentially for council laws. However, under the new Code of Mooney practice, that then gets caught up in the whole, when does it cease to be confidential information, and at what point in time does council then need to release that to the community and the like. So that's why it's come out the way it has. It's to address what is required under the Code of Mooney practice, but also to make sure that we don't breach any privacy principles, which is legislation that we have to abide by.
I understand that, but as part of our documents that we need to consider with weight, and there's no name attached to it, how do I know the CFO didn't write that? I'm just taking your word for it.
Councillor King, that is up to you to determine what weight you give to that. I can't give you any other explanation other than what I've given you in relation to what we have to provide and what we have to protect in relation to privacy. How much weight you choose to apply to that submission is entirely up to you. The same as any other submission that would come to council. We don't necessarily vet who they are from or ascertain the veracity of what they're saying or who they purport to represent.
Councillor Jerd, a question?
Can I put it up to defer it?
Well, sorry, we'll have to deal with this one first. So vote on this, and then we can look to defer secondary.
Wouldn't it be a procedural motion for a deferral?
Yeah.
If you voted on by council?
Okay. Oh, sorry, procedural motion. Yeah, well, we've finished debate, sorry. So we can put it forward?
Yep.
Yep. So we need to second, yep, Councillor King. We'll put it forward for a vote. All in favour? Councillor Dixon, Jerd and King. Those against? Councillor Dunn, Harrington, Hill, Lee, Madden, Mason, Palmowski, Pascoe, Hawkins and Watton. It's carried. Sorry, it's lost. Oh, the deferral is lost. Now we'll go back and deal with the motion. So we'll now put the motion forward. All in favour? Councillor Dunn, Harrington, Hill, Lee, Madden, Mason, Palmowski, Pascoe, Hawkins and Watton. And those against, Councillor Dixon, Jerd and King. It's carried. Okay, now moving on to report CC2/2026. It's the review of the distributive equity in council's rating structure. Could I have someone to please move that? Councillor Hill, seconded Councillor Lee. Speaking, Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mayor Watton. I just wanted to speak briefly to this item because it's, I guess it's a rather interesting wording structure for the name of the topic, and it may need some clarity for those following along in the gallery or at home. This recommendation in this report provides information around a proposed review into council's rating structure. So for the layperson, that is the way in which council goes about sort of building its rating structure around how the rates are charged to the different categories and how different rates are applied against those rate notices. So I guess, for example, when our review into our financial position began, I went in and pulled up old copies of my residential rate notices to identify sort of how the rates had changed and the property values, unimproved land values had changed in the years gone by. And something that came out pretty clear in those rate notices was that the council's rating structure has for quite some time now included a base rate for rating categories that is which is common across all individual rate notices. So my rates notice includes, specifically in relation to land rates, a section related to ad valorem, which is a percentage applied to my unimproved land value, which results in a number, and then a base rate of 430. Now the base rate is consistent across ratepayers regardless of their land value, and then the ad valorem section is applied and has an effect depending on the unimproved land value as determined by the New South Wales Valuer General. It was brought to council's attention during the independent review by Professor Drew that changes to specifically that base rate and other areas across the rating structure could have a benefit to ratepayers and the way in which the rates are distributed across the rate base. So, for example, a modification to the base rate or a reduction in the base rate would therefore allocate more of the rating weight to the ad valorem, and so the amount paid by individual ratepayers may be adjusted more specifically in relation to their unimproved land value as opposed to the consistent base rate across all ratepayers. That could have an effect in helping those who have a much lower unimproved land value as opposed to those who have a very high unimproved land value. Of course, it's not a perfect solution because there is the value of the unimproved land value assigned to someone's property is not indicative of their revenue or their income or the amount of resources they have at their disposal. It is often related, but not always, because of course some households, some individuals may inherit land or come into possession of land through other means in which it does not reflect their, excuse me, their financial position. However, in the initial information that's been provided to councillors and included in some of the supplementary enclosures, early numbers, especially within early estimates, I should say, especially within business rating categories, has looked to have a much more positive outcome when we're looking at low value business lots compared to the really big sort of major supermarket type places that have a very large footprint in the residential land that they hold. So I think that that one example included a number of other efforts that will be made within this review. I think will help to modernise council's rating structure in a way that's more equitable across our community and our rate base.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Jode.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. What is the average land value that we have in the LGA? Because when I look at this, I'm not sure who's what. So the average land value, what would it roughly be?
I'll definitely put that through. I know there's a memo that came through with a big table and average and dissected, but I'll put that definitely put it through to CFO.
Because it makes a huge difference from the red to the green with some of the ones. For example, when it's 887,000, if we stick to the existing base rate, it's a 47.98% increase, whereas if we adopt this, it's a 61.08%. Is that right?
So firstly, on the average land value, the average residential, or the median, residential rate is 343,000 on 2022 land value. So we are about to receive the land values for 2025, so that figure will change. But on the data we have at the moment, it's 343,000. The base rate information that you're talking to there, which is a calculation exercise, not a decision made by council as yet, does have a change of that magnitude in the highest decile. So basically where the final 10% of residential land values are, the maths will be that if one is going down, ultimately those on a higher unimproved land value will go up.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to get my head around it, because it doesn't seem very fair that some people might get as low as 32, 28%, and then you could get someone that's on at 61%, whereas on the existing it's 27 to 47%. So it seems a little bit more fair than what we're proposing here.
So to be clear, we're not proposing anything yet. That was a calculation exercise for the councillors. Ultimately, it will be a decision for council when the revenue policy is brought forward for exhibition, and probably something that we would be workshopping as we go through the operational plan, revenue policy and budget for the next year.
Okay, so what will go out to the public? Is this what we're doing? What going distributive? No, it's not going out to the public. This
Put it through to the director.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Watton. Councillor Jerd, I think it's important to understand and not conflate the two issues. So I get that you're referencing the information as provided in Professor Drew's report in relation to the base rate. What council is looking at now is a commitment that over the next 12 months we will look at our rating structure and how it's set up. Part of that will be how do we split the total pool of rates across our four main rate categories, being residential, business, farmland and mining. And then how was the structure under that? Do we add in other additional categories or subcategories? Do we remove some additional categories or subcategories that is currently there? Do we continue using a base rate? Do we then look at a minimum rate? So that's all the stuff that will be undertaken over the next 12 months around a longer term review of how our structure looks. The information that you're referencing now is in relation to what was provided to the professor and the councillors in what we may do to help some of the lower socioeconomic impacts of a proposed SRV. So whilst they are essentially joined, they are two separate things in relation to what we're proposing. So this is about looking, how do we set up our structure in years going forward, and have we got it right? Have we got the split right between residential as opposed to business as opposed to farmland? And then how do we then make sure that what everyone's paying is fair and equitable? That aside is separate to the SV component that council debated earlier, whilst they are still linked, because essentially the rate structure is how we will do it. And the CFO is right. What we will do is we'll make the application to IPART as part of that proposal, and what the professor has recommended is that we look at reducing the base rate for this year, for next rating year, being from the 1st of July, as part of our application. That will be captured in our revenue policy that's brought to council as part of our integrated plan and reporting documents in April, May, June. And depending on what IPART says, whether you get that once or twice. And then at the same time and moving forward over the next 12 months, we'll look at what we do with our rating structure holistically. Have we got the mix right? Are we putting the emphasis in the right areas? Do we need different categories? Do we need to abolish base rates altogether and go to a minimum rate, or do we just do it all ad valorem? Do we have one rate foot charge for the whole LGA for every property, regardless of whether you're business, mining or the like. That's the decisions that would be looked at under the distributive equity thing. And that would also then come back to council after all the investigation was done and have a round table and a workshop and work out what it is that we want to do. And then that would then go out to the community in future years and go, this is what we're proposing of how we can make our rating structure and our impacts more equitable across all of our ratepayers. So I hope that helps trying to understand the difference between the two reports and what it is that you're actually considering at this point in time.
I wanted to make it very clear because that to me is not extremely clear. It looks like you're voting for red or green, right? That's how it reads to me, that you're voting for red or green. And it seems very much like it's under the general manager undertake. It doesn't sort of say very clearly that that's going to come back to us to talk about it. It's not very clear that it's not going to be something that goes away and we don't then have a say on it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the dot point 2 of the recommendation, the report comes back to council for consideration and adoption. So we'll go and do all the work, which is what officers do if council elects to go down this path. And part of that consultation with councillors and our community and the like, we'll come back and say to the councillors, this is what we're recommending, this is the best way. And you guys will make the decision. But it's not necessarily a decision that will impact 26, 27 in relation to the rating year. It will be a future rating years and operational plans that we'd build that into.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pamelski.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think the Director answered my question in response to Councillor Jurd's question. It does say up there to report back to Council, and I just wanted to clarify if that will be a workshop so we can have a better understanding of what will come back. All right, thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Can I just seek some clarification? Are we allowed to have subcategories again? They were taken out quite a few years ago, and I'm fairly sure, I remember we sent representation through Local Government New South Wales at how limiting, I guess you would say, where there's properties that don't necessarily fit business or farmland or residential, and we had to kind of choose one that sort of almost fitted the best. And there was quite a lot of appealing and toing and froing a fair few years ago. It would be wonderful if we were allowed to differentiate again.
Put that through to our longest serving director we've got, who might be able to have some historical context. Director.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. We've always been able to have subcategories. I think what your reference is, a number of years ago, there was a range of categories you had that weren't compliant with the Local Government Act at the time, and they were removed. The Local Government Act provides that you have 4 main categories of rate categories, and then you may have other subcategories depending on, as long as they meet essential criteria. At the moment, we have 2 subcategories in farmland, under farmland, and 1 in residential. So part of this review will be looking at that and go, is that right? Is that what we need? Do we need to look at other things? And then making sure that that's actually compliant with what the legislation says, and then making sure what that will look like and how that would work. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I think that will be a very wonderful addition if we could investigate that. I'm sure there's a lot of people that still aren't happy with the way they were categorised, and if we're able to, obviously as part of this, the workshops and that sort of investigation, it would be wonderful to find more appropriate categories for some of our more unique parcels of land. So that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that closed the debate. We'll put the matter forward for a vote. All in favour? Councillor Dixon, Dunn, Harrison, Hill, Lee, Madden, Mason, Pamelski, Pascoe, Hawkins and Watton. Those against, Councillor Jurd and King. It's carried. Now, that's the final matter. Now, unless there was any councillor reports. No, I haven't received any either, so...